Okay, so we're going to do a self-portrait using a grid. Now, all of you should have your grid paper as well as your photograph with an outline for your silhouette. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to trace that silhouette. If you've already done this, you can skip forward to the next section, which will be some coloring. So I'm just tracing a silhouette, copying what I see square by square. Okay, so there we've got our silhouette. The next step is we're going to create our background. We're going to do that using a checkerboard of two colors in the background. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do after we've done our background is we're going to do the hair. Okay, and so we're kind of doing one square at a time. I like to start out by putting in some highlights, and I do that with the white, and I'm kind of doing several squares at the same time. I'm kind of looking at where I have the highlights in here and putting that in first, because I definitely want these highlights to show up. Okay, so there's what I consider to be the highlights. Then I'm going to go in with some yellow, because he does have blonde hair. You're going to have to decide for yourself what color hair you have and make it accordingly. I like to do I'm doing little short lines, and I like to do them in the direction that the hair goes. So that's kind of what I'm doing here, okay? And so he's got hair going off this way, and little short lines. It's kind of blending that white that I put in there with the yellow to make a blonder. Okay, so now I'm coming down the side of his head. You can see that I'm not filling in the entire square because, well, his hair doesn't fill in the entire square. But I do use the squares as a guide or gauge to tell me where to place this. There's a little more down here by his ear. Okay. Now, a lot of times it's blonde. I like to go over the yellow that I've done with some white. It tends to make it pop out. The yellow, a lot of times for blonde, will look a little green on top of the black, and so by adding a little more white. Now I'm going to add some brown in there because there are some darker areas, and so I'm going to get some brown in there to kind of make it look more like hair. And you can see I'm kind of making little short lines to kind of simulate hair, okay, rather than coloring it in solid. I like doing these little shorter lines. I'm going to go over it some more with some yellow to kind of blend in that brown a little bit more. Okay, you see it's kind of a multi-step process getting these colors in there. And you just kind of have to work with it until it's like you like it. Okay, until it looks like hair. All right, now we're gonna count that as being done. You might want to work on it a little bit more. The next thing we're going to do are the eyes. Okay, and we're going to use the grid to help us place the eyes in the correct spot. Okay, so if I look here, I count 1, 2, 3, 3 grids down, and it's 2 across. So it's going to be in this spot. I know a lot of times you want to put the eyes up higher. That's a common misconception with doing a portrait, is putting the eyes too high in the face. They actually are going to go about right here. So if I look at it, I've got an eye and it's a little bit above the center in this square. It's almost right in the middle. And so I'm going to use this white, and I'm actually going to be doing the whites of his eyes first. We can kind of barely see those in there. Okay, and so I'm going to put some white here for the white of his eye on the left side, and then some white of the eye on the right side. Okay, that's a little bit big, but we're going to take a black, and if you look at your eyes or you look at his eyes, there's like a thin black line. It's a shadow line from the eyelid. Okay, and I'm going to draw that with this black. Okay, so that's the upper eyelid there. And then I'm going to do the lower eyelid. He's got kind of tight eyes, but that's okay. Draw it that way. If your eyes are more open, you would of course draw them more open like that. Okay, and then I'm going to do this eyelid. Notice that this eyelid is almost to this edge over here. So you don't want to center it up like you did here. His head's slightly turned, so they're not going to be precisely centered. Also, I always do that and don't get the well, we'll just leave that there. I'll fix that later. I was going to erase it because you can't erase these oil pastels. It needs to be down a little bit so his eyes are more in line. I wasn't looking at where this eye is, and so I want to get that white lined up. I don't want his eyes to look wonky. Okay. Then we'll do this eyelid there. Okay, so there we've got his eyes in. Okay, now his eyes, I think, are brown, and so I'm going to put a little bit of brown in here. I don't color the whole thing in brown because you really don't see that. And even at looking at people, you don't always see all the color in their eye because some of their eye is in shade, and so it's going to be a little bit not visible. It's just going to look dark, and this just kind of adds to realism. I'm actually going to add a little bit of black to it because that brown seems to be just a little bit bright. And then the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put a highlight in there. Okay, that just kind of livens up the eye. I just put a little dot here, a little white dot there, and that kind of makes the eyes look slick, makes them look like they have moisture on them. Okay, now if you look at this face here, you can see that there's some shadows around his eyes, and I'm going to put just a few bits of black here that I'm going to blend in with the flesh tone. Okay, so I'm going to make that, add some black around. I'm just making little black dots. I'm kind of referring back to the picture there where the shadows should be on here. I've actually got more shadows on this side than the other side, so I'm going to add a little bit more there. And I'm going to use this kind of pinkish color for the skin tone to begin with. You'd have to look at your own skin tone to determine which one you're going to use. I always cheat and use this kind of peach color just for expediency. It's not necessarily the same color as him. You'd have to do more blending, but just to speed things up. Okay, now I'm also going to use this to create the illusion of eyelashes because these things are too big and fat to really draw eyelashes. So I'm going to kind of go into the black there a little bit. I'm going to go about halfway into that black line, and I'm smearing it up. I'm kind of doing a radial design here with the oil pastel kind of radiating out from the eye. And what that does is it just kind of creates the illusion that there are eyelashes there. It also puts a little bit of shadow in there because it pulls a little bit of the black out. Okay, and that's what we're really trying to do, is just create the illusion that there are some eyelashes there. And you can see that kind of does that. Not real long, you don't want big long eyelashes, and we'll do that with both of the eyes. Okay. I always start out a little bit lighter before I start really getting into it. That way you don't end up with a big glob of oil pastels wherever you start. Kind of ease into it a little bit. Oil pastels seem to be really forgiving in doing the drawing. I've really enjoyed learning about them with all of y'all, because I never really used oil pastels much before this. Okay, now I'm going to start adding some skin. I'm going to make the skin go all the way up to his forehead. Okay, and I'm going to do that by first blending in these shadows here, and I'm just kind of taking my oil pastel. I'm not tapping it per se, as I'm making like little short lines, but I'm kind of doing them in different directions. And you can see my hand kind of going in different directions there. I'll try and get it where we can see better. Get my hand out of the way of the picture here. I guess I need a cameraman or something in here to do this with. I'm gonna, because I just have the camera stationary, and you can see that it just kind of gradually builds up. He's got a big forehead. His hair is way up there, kind of like mine. My forehead goes all the way to the back of my head. Okay. But you can see this kind of random line technique really kind of adds an interesting texture to the skin. And you can tell that I'm not banging it because I'm not breaking off a lot of pieces. I've noticed that when kids start just tapping it straight down, that it starts to break up the oil pastel. And I'm holding pretty close to the tip there so that I don't break this oil pastel into smaller pieces. They are rather fragile, and so you have to kind of be careful with them. One of the things that I was trying to do is to kind of emulate the artist Chuck Close and leaving the grid showing. You see I kind of left the grid showing up there, but and that is certainly something that you can do with your piece, is leave the grid showing. I know I have several in the class that have left the grid showing, and I'll leave it showing up there. If you want to, and like here I forgot, actually between the eyes and in the features I'm kind of leaving, I'm not showing the grid on them, just because you end up sometimes with the line going, you know, right through an eye or something like that, and it's a little distracting. If you want to accentuate the lines of the grid after you're done and you've got some places where you've accidentally gone over with the oil pastels, once again you can take an eraser and erase it. And as I'm doing this, I'm looking around the room to see if I see one sitting out. I kind of cleaned up and moved some stuff around before I started this video, and I moved stuff out of my way. I did have a big pile of stuff here that I was working with, and I cleaned up. I gotta quit doing that. Okay, you see that's really starting to fill in, and it does give a nice texture to the skin, rather than just lines and stuff. It makes it more random and natural looking. Have it like this. Now, one of the things that you can do, and in looking at this picture over here, there are some highlights. And so after we get this done, I'm going to show you about putting a few little highlights into the picture. And you can do that with just some white. And I'm just going to go in there and add some white in there where he's got those highlights on his skin, different from highlights in your hair. Okay, so I'm just going to add some white in there, and that just kind of brightens it up where the light's shining on it. Okay, he's also got some highlights here on his eyebrow and over the top of this one too. Okay, and you can see that there I'm hitting it too hard. I'm talking about not doing it, and I'm doing it. Okay. And one of the things about drawing and talking at the same time, sometimes hard to do. Okay, so there is the face. I'll come in a little bit, see if I can get a little zoom in on it. Focus here. Okay, so there we go with that. And so now the next thing that we're going to do is the nose. Okay, and the nose, if you look at it, the nose is right here where this intersection is. It's a little bit below that. Okay, and so I'm going to put the nose holes in. This nose hole is almost on the line, just below that one. And then this nose hole is there. One of the ways you can tell where the nose holes go is they almost go precisely underneath the corners of the eyes. Okay, it's almost a straight drop down. Now, if you look at the nose, there's a highlight over this nostril, a whiter area, and a highlight over this nostril. I'll put those highlights in. Then we've got a highlight that runs up the center. Okay, so I'm going to add that. And it's not right on that line there. It kind of runs up the center between the eyes. And just kind of look at it and see what the shape of that highlight is and just kind of blend that in. Okay, so there's the highlight of the nose. And then, once again, I'm going to cheat and I'm going to use this one color as the skin tone. You probably will have to use more than that, and that's just a matter of blending the colors together. Okay, I like to take this and kind of put these lines, if you notice I'm running all in the same direction, in the direction that the nose goes. That kind of helps pop it off the page. Alright, I've got some shadow up there that's going to blend in, and then kind of come around, come out under the eye. I'm going to keep working this around. You see the form of the nose starting to appear on your paper. Okay, so there I've got that. I'm going to add some more highlight in here. Sometimes you have to do these things in layers. And then underneath here, there's some different values of this skin tone. And I can do that by also going harder or softer on here and letting some of the black of the paper show through. Okay. That also is another way of creating different values of the skin tone, as opposed to like we did up here where we added some black to it. Here I'm just not pressing as hard, and that lets some of the black show through, adding some value there. Okay, now I've noticed that there's a little bit of a highlight here on the side of his face, and so I'm actually going to bring it a little harder over there, and that's going to give a highlight there on the side of his face. I'm going to keep coming around. Now, when I get to his ear, I'm going to stop a little bit and keep working down. Now he needs some highlights here on his face. There are some brighter areas. So I'm going to add some white in there to lighten that up, to give some depth to it. Need to reduce down this nose hole a little bit so it doesn't look like he's got a ginormous nose. And I'm going to keep working this skin tone over until I get to the ear over here. I'm going to leave the ear for later. And come down over here. I just keep referring back to the picture over here as I draw to see if I'm coming up similar. And I want to get down to about even with his mouth, because the mouth is the next thing that we're going to do. Okay, so you can see I kind of stopped the grid up there. Okay, so and one thing you can do is if you notice on his face there are some smile lines and things like that, and I'm taking this black and I'm really not pressing it down at all. I'm letting just a little bit of the black come off, so it's a very light touch to kind of get some of that shape in around his nose, because I don't want it to be a particular line on his face as much as just some changes in value, some shading there. Just takes a nice light touch. Okay. Now the ears, if we look at the ears, there are some highlights on them, usually at the top. And down here on the earlobe, it's usually lighter. This light hits there. Then there's going to be some darker areas in here. I like to make them kind of symmetrical. A little dark there, a little dark there. Then we're going to put some flesh in. I try and leave just a little bit of a line between the cheek and the ear, just to kind of help separate out. There really isn't a line on the picture, but this is just a kind of a cheat to make the ear look more visible. And really you end up with just kind of these lines and stuff, and if you stop for a second and look at it, then it's like all of a sudden, oh, it does look like an ear. Ears are funny. Okay, now the last feature that we're going to do is going to be the mouth, and I like to use pink for that. No matter what your skin tone is, your lips are usually a little pinker than your face. Okay, and so I'm going to use this pink, and I take it and I do kind of a pushing motion for the top lip. And what that does is it helps to create the, your lips kind of have like little wrinkles in them, and it kind of gives the illusion of those little wrinkles. We're using a lot of the directionality of this oil pastel, the direction that you color it, to help add other details. Just like we did up here with the eyelashes, we're doing the same thing with the lips. It also, by doing this in a direction, it also gives some changes in value to it. So you get the one edge of it being a little bit darker than the other, the inside being a little bit darker value than the outer edge. It kind of bleeds, or not bleeds, but fades off. You get a little bit of gradation there. And then the bottom lip is actually going to be a pulling motion. I'm pulling it down towards me. And when I get up to the where the lips meet, I don't really let them touch. I give a little bit of a shadow line there between the lips. Now, I'm going to add some gums to him, and they don't go all the way across. If your gums went all the way across, you'd have a really big mouth. Okay. Then, I'm going to use the white. Try and smooth that off there. Don't do this at home. Okay. So we're going to take this, and I'm actually going to kind of push the teeth up into the gums. So I'm kind of looking at his teeth. He's got a little gap there. He's got a little gap here. Must have been losing some teeth. Okay, so there's his smile. Okay, and then I'm going to continue with the skin around it. Now, here's where we start getting into the chin and stuff, and I'm going to kind of follow his chin around. I'm going to create this first just so I have that chin started. Okay. Okay, so there I've got his chin. I'm going to add a little bit of black down here so that I have some shadow between his chin and his neck. And we're going to put in some blue here. For his shirt. Now I'm going to speed things up. Let's get this colored in blue for his shirt. And this is his collar. Just adding some shading in there. We'll blend that. Just to give the illusion of a little bit of a collar there, just to Make it look like he's, oops, y'all can't see that. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so there's his collar, and now I'm going to go in and finish up his neck, and I'm kind of pulling that black that I put in earlier down into his neck. It's going to go from a darker to a lighter. You can see the shadow there. I'm trying not to get into either the blue or this part of his chin. And there we go. So that looks pretty close. All right, and so that's how to do a oil pastel self-portrait or portrait of someone else, some kids whose picture I found. All right, so enjoy, get them done so that we can get them into the art show. Thank you very much.